This is the most famous dragon slaying in human history. It's on the flag of England, the coat of arms of Moscow, it's painted on churches in Ethiopia, Lebanon, Georgia, and Brazil, and for 1700 years, this one image, a soldier, a lance, and a monster, has been everywhere. There's just one problem with it. For the first 800 years that people have told the story of St. George, there was no dragon. No lance, no princess, no monster, nothing. The man was real, he lived and he died, and the way he died is honestly more disturbing than anything in the legend. But the dragon was added later, centuries later. And when you find out where it actually came from, and why it stuck, it'll change how you read every single dragon story ever told. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly what the dragon was. So let's gather our bearings for a second, and let's start with the version that you think you know. And I want to tell it properly because the details will matter later. The story goes something like this. There was a city named Selene in what is now Libya. And outside the city was a lake. More of a swamp, really, but living in that swamp was a dragon. Its breath was poison, it killed anything that came near the water, and the city's water came from that lake. So when the people of Selene did what people always did with a monster they can't kill, they started feeding it. 2 sheep a day, driven out to the water's edge, and for a while it worked. The dragon would eat the sheep and leave the city alone. But eventually, the sheep ran out. So the city moved to 1 sheep and 1 human, chosen by lottery. Every family in the city drew lots, rich, poor, it didn't matter. And every day, someone's child was walked out to the edge of the swamp and left there. This went on for a while, but one day the lot fell upon the king's daughter. The king begged. He offered the city his gold, half his kingdom, anything. Take someone else's child, and the people of Selene, who had been giving up their own children by his law, refused. Fair is fair, after all. The princess was dressed like a bride, the legend is very specific about that, by the way, and walked out to the lake to die. Then a soldier happened to ride past, a young Roman officer named George. He asked the girl why she's standing alone by a poisoned swamp, and she tells him to run. He doesn't. Then the huge monstrous dragon comes out of the water, and George makes the sign of the cross and charges. He pins through it with his lance. Then everyone forgets this next part. He doesn't kill it. Not yet, at least. He tells the princess to throw him her belt, her girdle, or whatever it was, and he loops it around the dragon's neck. Then he leads this wounded dragon back into the city like a dog on a leash. The people all, for obvious reasons, panic. They're like, oh my god, why would you do this? And George stands in the square of the town holding a leashed monster and makes them all an offer. Believe in Christ, be baptized, and I will kill this thing right now. The legend says that 15,000 people in the city converted that day. George then beheaded the dragon, and it takes 4 ox carts to haul the body out of the city. The king offers him a fortune, but George refuses, gives it all to the poor of the city, and rides off. It's a great story, genuinely one of the best constructed legends in Western canon, and almost none of it is old. That version is written down around the year 1260, nearly 1,000 years after George died. So let's do what this channel does, let's drain the swamp and see what's actually at the bottom. So here's the uncomfortable truth historians have to admit up front. We know frustratingly little about the actual St. George. The outline is pretty solid and it goes something like this. He was born in the late 3rd century, probably in Cappadocia, in modern-day Turkey, with family roots in Palestine, near a town called Lydia. And remember Lydia because that name is going to matter in a big way later. He became a soldier in the Roman army, and by most accounts, he was really, really good. Like a very good soldier, and he even got to a point where he was an officer serving close to the Emperor Diocletian, which was a very bad spot for a Christian to be standing in the year 303. In February 303 AD, Diocletian launched what history now calls the Great Persecution, the last and largest and the most vicious campaign against Christians the Roman Empire ever ran. I mean, he made Nero almost look like a saint, which is pretty hard to do. Churches were torn down, scriptures were burned, Christians were stripped of rank and legal rights, and eventually of their lives. And the tradition goes that George, a serving officer, publicly refused to comply. Some accounts connect him with a story told by the early church historian Eusebius, who was alive at that time, an unnamed man of high standing who saw the emperor's edict posted in Nicomedia, walked up to it, and ripped it down in front of everyone. Now, whether that was George or not, the ending is the same in every version. He would not renounce his faith. He was tortured, and on April 23rd, 303, he was beheaded. There was no lake, no princess, no dragon, just a soldier who defied an emperor to his face, knowing exactly what it would cost him. Ultimately, extremely selfless act. He defended what he believed was right. And the detail that I find so genuinely fascinating is that his cult exploded almost immediately. A shrine at Lydia, veneration across the Eastern Empire within about a century or so. But the stories that grew around him got so wild so fast that the church itself tried to pump the brakes. There's a famous decree associated with Pope Gelasius at the end of the 400s, which essentially throws up its hands about George. It counts him among the saints whose names are rightly honored, but whose deeds are known only to God. And just think about that for a second. Less than 200 years after his death, the church's official position on George was basically, real saint, don't believe everything you hear. So what were the people hearing? Oh boy, it was a lot, and you're gonna love it. The early legends of St. George, the ones circulating in the 400s and 500s, the one the decree was really worried about, it didn't have a dragon. They had something kind of weirder. In these early acts of St. George, he wasn't tortured for a day. He's tortured for 7 years. Stretched on a wheel of blades. He's thrown into quicklime. He's fed poison by a magician. And in most extreme versions, he is killed 3 times. Chopped into pieces and buried. Burned to ash and scattered. And every time, he raises back to life to keep testifying the word of Christ. Along the way, he converts the empress. He converts the magician sent to kill him. He raises the dead, and it reads less like a biography and more like a superhero serial. Because functionally, that's what it was. Each retelling had to top the last one. And this is a pattern regulars of the channel will recognize instantly because it's exactly how these urban legends behave. A real event. A soldier is executed in 303, but he becomes a story. Then that story gets retold, and every teller just adds a floor to the building. And within a couple of centuries, the original ground floor is buried so deep that the church itself can't excavate it. But notice what's still missing. 7 years of torture, 3 resurrections, sorcerers, empresses, miracles, still no dragon. So where did that part come from? And I promised you that at the start, and I'm getting to it. The first images of George fighting a serpent started showing up around the 10th and 11th centuries in Cappadocia, Georgia, and right inside the heart of his oldest cult territory. And in some of the earlier versions of the mounted warrior image, the thing under the horse's hoofs isn't a dragon at all. Sometimes it's a man, often understood to be the emperor, the persecutor himself, Diocletian. Also, fun note about Diocletian, he is the Roman emperor who retired to a cabbage farm. And when they tried to get him back to run the empire again, he said, guys, if you could see the cabbages I'm growing on this farm, you would understand that I have to stay here. Which is very interesting. Because he is the biggest persecutor of Christians ever. Him and Nero fight for that position a lot. It's actually insane. But again, I just want you to sit with that for a second. The oldest enemy in George's iconography wasn't a monster. It was the empire that killed him. More specifically, the emperor growing cabbages. The serpent seems to have grown out of that image. Evil made visual. The way that the book of Revelation describes Satan, that ancient serpent, the dragon, George spearing a snake, was theology you could read without knowing how to read, which was pretty important back then. And George wasn't the first holy warrior to strike that pose. Long before him, there was the Archangel Michael. Open the book of Revelation, chapter 12, war breaks out in heaven, and Michael and his angels throw down the dragon. And the text names it directly, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. That's 1st century scripture. And it's the single sequence that gives every later artist permission to draw the defeat of evil as a spear through a snake. Michael is the original. Winged, hovering, no rescue, no maiden, it's just a pure version. Heaven's soldier against the ancient serpent and evil itself. And when George's serpent finally appears centuries later, he inherits the exact same meaning. Holy warrior versus the dragon of evil. Michael gives George the theology. But Michael doesn't give him the story. The horses, the princess, the water, that came from somewhere else entirely, and it's one of my favorite details in this entire thing. Remember Lydia, George's hometown, the center of his cult? Well, only 10 miles down the road from Lydia is the ancient port of Joppa, or Joppa. And for centuries before George was born, Joppa was famous across the classical world as the setting of a very specific Greek myth, Perseus, who rode to the princess's rescue, Andromeda, chained to the water as a sacrifice to a sea monster. A hero, a princess, offered to a beast at the water's edge, a monster slain, told for centuries. 10 miles from the epicenter of George's vinification. Scholars have now been pointing at that coincidence for a decent amount of time, and I'll let you draw your own conclusion, but if you wanted a laboratory for granting an ancient monster slaying template onto a new local hero, you could not design a better stretch of coastline. Then came the accelerant, the Crusades in 1098. At the siege of Antioch, Crusaders reported a vision of St. George riding at the head of a ghostly army, leading them to victory. Whatever you make of that, the effect on Europe was electric. Tens of thousands of soldiers came home from the east carrying stories of the warrior saint. The Eastern iconography, serpent and all, came with them. And then around 1260, an Italian archbishop named Jacobs de Vergine compiled a book of saints' lives called the Golden Legend, which became one of the most copied and most read books of the entire Middle Ages. And that's where the full Selena story appears. The lake, the lottery, the princess dressed as a bride, the leash dragon, the 15,000 converts. When the printing press arrived, the Golden Legend was among the first bestsellers in the world. The dragon wasn't just canon now, it was mass media. England made him the patron saint. Edward III built the Order of the Garter under his banner around 1348, and by Shakespeare's time, English soldiers were charging into battle with his name in their war cry. Georgia, the country, Catalonia, where his feast day is celebrated with books and roses, Ethiopia, Portugal, and here's one that surprises almost everyone, George is venerated in parts of the Islamic world too. In the Levant, he's been intertwined with the figure of Al-Qadir, and there are shrines nearby Bethlehem where Christians and Muslims have prayed to the same saint side by side for centuries. A Roman soldier executed in 303 became one of the only figures on Earth claimed by 3 continents and 2 faiths because of a dragon that he never even fought. So let's close the loop here. I said that once you know where the dragon came from, it changes how you read every dragon story, and here's what I meant by that. Go back and look at Selene. Really look at that legend. The dragon doesn't attack the city, it doesn't have to. The city feeds it. First the sheep, then when the sheep run out, the children. By lottery, by law, with everyone's consent, because that's the price of being left alone. The monster in the story isn't scary because of its teeth, it's scary because of the arrangement. An entire society calmly walking its children to the water, one per day, telling itself that there's no other option. Now put that next to the real man. A soldier in 303, watching an empire demand everyone quietly comply. Burn the incense, deny what you believe, and you get to live. Everyone around him made that trade, but he didn't. That's why the fiction attached itself to this martyr, and stuck for 1,000 years. The dragon is the empire. The dragon is persecution. The dragon is anything a community keeps appeasing because fighting it seems impossible. You can connect this with so many other things in our own society today. And the story of George is the story of one person who looks at that arrangement everyone else has accepted and he refuses. The medieval mind didn't add the dragon to make the story less true. They added the dragon to make the truth visible. The facts are a real man, a real empire, a real refusal, a real execution on April 23rd, 303. The fiction, a lake in Libya, a lottery, a princess, a lance. And in between them, 800 years of storytellers doing what storytellers do. Taking something true that's hard to look at and giving it a shape you can't look away from. And that's not a corruption of history, it's folklore doing its job. Every legend on this channel works this way if you dig far enough. A true story at the bottom and centuries of scaffolding built on top of it. If that's your kind of thing, the American Urban Legend Iceberg series is on your screen now. It goes a lot deeper and a lot darker than this one did. And if there's a saint, a legend, or monster that you want taken apart like this, put it in the comments. Half the episodes on this channel started off as a comment. I'll see you at the next layer down. Have a great, blessed day.